welcome. I'm so grateful that you are all here this evening to the Salata Institute's Career in Climate Action Speaker Series. And my name is Leslie Hubbard. I am the program manager at the Salata Institute, whose mission is to develop and promote durable, effective, and equitable solutions to the climate change challenges confronting humanity. And before I do the honor of introducing our impressive panel of speakers today, I would first like to thank our partners at Harvard Innovation Labs for making this event possible tonight. We will be exploring the role of impact investing, deep tech startups, and entrepreneurship and social innovation as key drivers that can change the climate crisis into societal transformation to support a more just, sustainable, and equitable future for the people on the planet. And tonight's conversation, we're going to divide into two separate panels. The first panel will consist of Harvard Business School alumni Rajesh Swaminathan and Evan Gordon Greenfield. Rajesh is a partner at Khosla Ventures who has 2 decades of experience assisting and investing in deep tech startups and manages the firm investment's climate portfolio. And Evan oversees British Columbia Investment Management's ESG program for its private equity asset class, and formerly was Senior Managing Director of Global Head at ESG at S&P Global, where he oversaw the company's ESG strategy. Rajesh and Evan are former HBS classmates and now industry colleagues, and they will discuss and critically evaluate with us challenges and opportunities within their respected fields and their take on the most innovative and groundbreaking solutions to the climate crisis and key elements to consider for those seeking to work in this industry. So let's start with Rajesh. Rajesh, you have an interdisciplinary educational background with degrees in chemical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, a master's in science from the University of Maryland, and of course you have a master's in business from Harvard Business School, and an impressive career that spans across industries. Essentially, you could have taken your career in a lot of different directions. Could you give us a sense of both how and why you became interested in integrating your education and industry experience towards a career more generally in climate action, and specifically now focusing on investing in deep tech startups? And in this response, could you speak to how you navigated your time and use of resources at Harvard and beyond to jumpstart your career in climate action?
Yeah, so many things. Timing plays a big role. So I was at HBS in 2006 to 2008. That was right during the Clean Tech 1.0 when things started. It's exactly like how it is now, except it was 1.0 versus 2.0. So 2007, when I was trying to figure out what to do, classic HBS, like when you don't know what you want to do, you typically take a banking or a consulting. So I ended up taking the banking route, but very specifically around clean tech banking because I wanted to understand what is happening. So that led to a lot of things in terms of my second year, what I was doing on focus on clean tech. But primarily it was very hot at that time, and I felt like my background in chemical engineering, material science, Bell Labs, all of that has a role in some of the things that companies were getting built out in solar, batteries, electrochromic windows, nuclear fusion, all of that stuff. So that was my way of getting into and learning, like, if I know these 3 or 4 things, how do I bring that together, make an impact, and get paid, rewarded well as well. So clean tech seemed like a perfect choice. So I've been sticking to the clean tech career for 15 years now. Been with Khosla Ventures for 4 years. Before that, I was heading another venture fund for about, I was there at Applied Ventures for 10 years. Your second question, how did I get into clean tech during my HBS time? So I got into the internship. At HBS, I don't know how better it is now, but in my second year, there was no activity on clean tech. There was a lot more happening in MIT. So I took a course in entrepreneurship lab at MIT, which meant like 2 days a week, you have to be at MIT. You're working with MIT engineers, Sloan folks. Of course, HBS is any day better than Sloan, but the MIT engineering team was very good. So we started working with a solar company called Styon. So this would be like a lot of effort every 2 days, apart from everything that was happening in HBS. But that also helped me understand how solar startups work, like what is happening in clean tech. Like it helped me get my hands dirty versus sitting here at HBS. One thing led to another. Then some of you are at Energy Club and Tech Media Club and all that stuff. So I was also the co-president of Tech Media Club and VP of VCPE Club. So like bunch of things like you all do when you have a FOMO in your second year HBS. But what that helped me was they had invited Vinod Khosla, the founder of my current fund, Khosla Ventures, for a talk. The Energy Club had invited him, not me. But I came to know this event was happening. So I actually reached out to him and said, hey, I'm working on your solar startup with a couple of things. Love the company, but I have some thoughts on how else it could be better. So that was a bait. He said, yeah, come over, when I'm driving from the hotel to the session, you can chat. So that was my entry into it. And then talk to him about what works, what doesn't work, all of that stuff. He connected me with his partner, Samir Kaul. He was working on a water desalination company, so he asked me to work with them. So this was my second startup I was working with, my second year at HBS. I was trying to do my own startup in a pre-cellulosic ethanol fuel company. So I was working with my classmate to found a company. Thankfully, that didn't work because we couldn't get the IP licensing. Otherwise, I would have gone that route. That would have been a disaster. I was also working with Greylock Partners to look at their India clean tech strategy. So all of this in my second year because I didn't know what to do. Somebody told me, particularly in VC, the easiest way to not get into a VC is to ask for a job to a VC. And that's the easiest way to kill the conversation. So I was primed for that. So in my second year, I was not going to anyone like looking for a job. I just focused on these 4 things. Different verticals, going deep enough, but broad enough so I can accumulate enough skill set. I was probably one of the last guys to get a job in my second year. So I got into clean tech investing at that point, and then been doing for 15 years. But the point is, any of these sessions, the symposium that you hold, all provide a lot of opportunities to meet the right people. But more importantly, if you're looking at career in clean tech, definitely leverage what is happening at MIT and figure out ways you can work with companies. You don't have to have a hard tech, material science background. In fact, a lot of people we are bringing into our climate companies are coming from completely different industries. Happy to chat about it versus being a monologue.
Well, I got more questions for you, Rajesh.
Sure.
We're going to start now with Evan. So similar question for you. You are a passionate member of the ESG movement and believe the capital markets can play a critical role in advancing climate action. How and why have you steered your career in this direction? And what did Harvard, or the roles that Harvard played in your career trajectory? What communities were you involved with, courses, internships, mentors to help you decide to choose this career?
First off, it's great to be here, and I had a chance to meet with a couple of folks beforehand, and it's great to see the spirit and the interest from the diverse school segments here at Harvard. One of the takeaways from Rajesh's story, I think, is that you probably shouldn't read your cases. You should just go and drive Vinod Khosla around, right? So that's some advice for some of the HBS students here. Don't worry about your cases. I didn't worry about that either. I didn't drive Vinod around, and I didn't do much activity. So, but I take a little bit of a different view of the question. And so Rajesh and I are section mates from HBS 2008, which feels like it's a very long time ago when you say that. We were in Section I, and we became very good friends since then, and we maintained the dialogue despite being on different coasts of the U.S. But, we spend a lot of time talking about, how to leverage our background, how to leverage the capital markets to really catalyze the transition to a low-carbon economy. And so I live in New York. I guess it's easy to tell which one of us is the cool Menlo Park person on the stage based upon how we dress. But so in New York,
and who puts bigger dollars behind?
Yeah, that's why he's nice to me, because Rajesh thinks he's going to get some dollars out of this from our pension fund. But for those of us.
He's nice to me because he thinks I can make him money.
Yeah, symbiotic relationship. But what happened a couple of weeks ago for those of you that were in New York was the New York Climate Change Climate Week, and that has been an interesting time in the city when it's the UN General Assembly. So it was good to put that together when a lot of folks are traveling in, and so I would say that for the first time. In Climate Week that we saw such a cohesion amongst the policy world and the capital markets and the corporate sphere. And these weren't just the impact funds, right? It was the Khoslas alike, but it was the traditional funds as well, because we're starting to see the economic opportunity associated with climate transition. But then what happened the following week was that we had the most amount of rainfall at the history since records were kept in the 1940s at JFK. And so what we understand is that, the speed of this transition and the amount of capital that we're deploying to it and the amount of innovation is not commensurate with the need that we have to speed it up. It's too slow. And we have to compress, 150 years in the next 30 or so years. And if we're honest, right, and Rajesh and I, we generally have, Rajesh was kind enough, he was at a conference sometime in the summer, and we spent 3 or 4 hours together talking about how we could leverage the Harvard ecosystem to get more involved in climate transition, and where we are in this trajectory. And, it's not all doom and gloom, but it's not good. We'll start to see more of these manifestations of these extreme physical risk events that will happen in increasing severity and frequency on a global basis. And so when we have events titled Careers in Climate Action, there will not be a choice for this generation. Everyone will have a career in climate, irrespective of if you consciously sought it out or not, because it's not just the purview of the energy sector, it's the financial services sector, it's the healthcare sector, it's the education sector. It's across the board will be impacted. Our capital markets system, our geopolitical system, our societal system has been leveraging cheap energy sources for the last 150 years, very effectively by and large, right? It's ushered in stunning economic prosperity, but as some of the folks who have an economics degree, I'm one, but I'd never really figured that out much. There's this concept of like no such thing as free lunch. So the free lunch has come, right, with the emissions in the carbon and the methane and the greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. I mean, we're at such a level now. It's I'm not a scientist, but it's 412 parts per million, which we hadn't seen. We saw this like 3 million to 5 million years ago in a different era. So the question becomes, what can folks like Rajesh and I do? We do different things in terms of capital allocation, in terms of investing. And then what everyone in this room, I was talking to some of our friends over here who are attorneys at Harvard Law School. There's a lot of activity in terms of climate litigation, and that is a catalyst of furthering the change. But it's a very, we're at a very decisive time in this trajectory, and we need to further catalyze the economic system and the geopolitical system. But the challenge is the current construct is not set up for that transition to happen as quickly. But there is opportunity for folks in here to help figure that out. And so if okay with you, and if okay with folks here, what I'd like to do is just to have a bit of a dialogue with Rajesh and ask him. It's kind of like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like when we get on the phone together, except there will be people listening in the conversation. So, and I would also, and please correct me, but like folks, feel free to ask questions like whenever, if you have a question. I mean, it's a small group, so whatever, please be informal about it. But so Rajesh, I'm curious from your perspective, you were involved in Clean Tech 1.0. When I mentioned to some colleagues in the private equity world about, investing in climate transition, they said, well, we saw what that story looked like, and it didn't end very well for many folks. So this was kind of the 2008 time period, this great rise in interest, and then it crashed. And so I want to ask you, what are the key takeaways from that time period? What are the lessons learned, and how do we ensure that this current iteration isn't reflective of that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say the Clean Tech 1.0 was not a failure by any means. There were 200 solar companies at one point. 98% of them failed, but that's not the metric you should use for judging whether something was a success or not. 2008, there was about 10 gigawatts of solar. Today, it's over 800 gigawatts of solar, like tremendous growth in terms of how solar has come down, costs, adoption, and all that stuff. Clean Tech 1.0, a lot of biofuels companies were there that failed, but batteries took off. Like one person, like we call about instigators. I don't know how many of you read the paper we sent around, but we call them as instigators. One person can make the biggest difference in any sector, and any of you could be that person, right? Tesla, Elon Musk single-handedly changed the trajectory of EV cars, and that killed the biofuel industry for cars, but we invested in a lot of biofuel companies. Many of them failed, but one of them made it through significantly. Like LanzaTech is a company that has spun out something called LanzaJet. That's the only sustainable aviation fuel company that's available today. So they were able to pivot from biofuels for cars to aviation fuels. So there are a couple of industries where this has been huge, And we have to learn from what worked and what didn't work. So there are a lot of learnings, and I'm happy to talk through that. But in the next generation, we've been investing in cement and hydrogen and steel. A lot more sectors are getting invested into now because, like Evan said, like any of those industries is ripe for climate disruption. Like you cannot stay away from it. It's just like another buzzword is AI. Like every industry is going to be affected by AI. Similarly, every industry is going to be affected by climate, and you better be part of it and figure out how can you be part of the solution than resisting it within your own industry, or not trying to figure out how to make a career out of it and make it impactful. So, yeah.
So, okay, so in terms of the electric vehicle industry and its great success of Tesla, but there's great complexity behind just some of these simplistic statements, right? So there's a professor at the business school that some may know, a gentleman by the name of George Serafin, that teaches on ESG and climate transition, that I would encourage you to read his work. I just met with him before, and I'm like, George, I should pay you because I basically say what you write in your papers, and I don't give you enough credit for it. So, but I guess I feel like I'm able to do that because I paid a bit of money to go to this institution. So, but when you see things just like electrification of the automobile industry, and you say that's great, and you go and get an electric vehicle, and you think you're contributing, but that's only looking at, in many respects, what's coming out emissions from the fuel pipe, right? But in terms of the mining for the rare earth minerals and the manufacturing, that can be a very carbon-intensive process. It could be, energy stemming from coal-fired plants in some parts of the world. So how do we progress things like the electrification of the mobility industry, but in a way that's actually net beneficial, right?
Look, I mean, like in anything, if you're trying to change a 100, 200-year-old oil and gas industry, you have to start somewhere. The electric car was just the start. Like 5, 8 years ago, whenever you talk about EVs, people used to say, oh, EV doesn't make sense because you're firing it from coal plants, which is true. But that has changed significantly in the last 4 or 5 years across many states, because many cities are going towards solar, right? So you have to change something big if it's going to have a big impact, and then go after every piece of the value chain to see how do you change it. Now it's happening from coal towards renewables. The other big one that's going to happen is nuclear fusion. So we made a bet like 5 years ago in a Boston company, Commonwealth Fusion System. In fact, Boston has some great startups coming up. Commonwealth Fusion System, that's going to disrupt the fusion industry. Fusion and geothermal are the only 24/7 baseload power energy generation system. Solar, you need batteries for continuous charging and all that stuff. So if nuclear fusion happens, that changes the paradigm in a significant way. Then you're powering your EVs with nuclear fusion. But coming back to the critical point Evan made, like no matter how you power it, you're still coming up with the materials that need to be mined. A lot of innovations happening on the mining side of things as well. Mining is dirty because you have to, dig into a lot of ground, spend 10 years, 15 years. The failure rate is extremely high. There are a lot of companies that are coming up and saying, how am I going to bring in new sensors, new ML and AI approaches to integrate all of this so you can detect the exact locations of the mines much faster, the exact materials much faster, so you decrease the chances of hurting the environment in a big way. That's number one. Number two, I would also say, the devil is in the details, right? The EV is done with NMC, manganese, cobalt kind of batteries, and those are a lot more dirty in terms of mining. So there are other batteries people are looking at, LFP, which is much less in terms of mining intensity and all that stuff. So you start somewhere and then figuring out, how do you address the whole overall value chain. So that part is critical. So you're not greenwashing with one solution and then letting that value chain go away. So it's important people work across all of these industries.
In terms of, so you mentioned fusion, and we've had a number of conversations on this. How do you feel about making bets in industries that there is significant science risk, significant technology risk, significant risk in terms of, even if you achieve it, how do you scale it at a cost manner that is, allowed in the economic market? How do you think about that at Khosla and as a clean tech investor, making these bets in these areas that are innovative, but there's significant risk?
Yeah. So take any book in climate. You can talk about 50 sectors you can invest in. So that's why there is a lot of greenwashing going on. Like we said, there are only 12 sectors that matter. And we said, if you bring the innovation to these 12 sectors, it changes the world. Like, there's no question. Like, within our fund, we never do cash-on-cash IRR estimates because those are meaningless for an early-stage science risk that you take. So we said things like nuclear fusion and geothermal, no matter what, you have to figure out how to make an investment in that area to make that, de-risk that. Now, that doesn't address the science risk. I'll come to that. Then there are industries that are obvious, like cement and steel, which are like 4 or 5% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to figure out a way to address that sector. So you figure out those 12 sectors and then say, okay, these are the only things I'm putting all my bets, all my money behind, and make sure I'm going to work on it. Just because you want to do it doesn't mean it can happen. So in the case of nuclear fusion, I'll just take that as an example. 8 years ago, 2015, like 8 years ago, when KV made the investment, Khosla Ventures made the investment, I was not there. We actually were tracking the whole nuclear fusion space across, this has been a 40-year story, right? It's not like it came out of nowhere. Like 40 years, people are working on tokamak reactors in Europe, US, and all that stuff. But what was significantly changing was the whole concept around high-temperature superconductors. That was going down the cost curve, improving the performance and all of that stuff. So at some point, we step back and say, hey, the technical innovation has happened so much that somebody should be cracking this nut in terms of getting the nuclear fusion approach right. So we worked with Dennis White and Bob Mumgard at, now it's called Commonwealth Fusion, but they were professors, postdoc students, all of that stuff, saying like, how do we crack that code? They came up with the entire plan on how would they build the reactor. Then we actually had technical diligence from 3 different groups that were actually independently diligencing the technology, comparing with everybody else. And these were world-class experts. They didn't know each one was talking to the company. So this was independent diligence that was done. And then it was a 6-9 month effort, like really going down the details and figuring out what do you need to do to de-risk it. This was a kind of a 10-year roadmap in terms of what needs to happen. So that's where you need to have the passion to make a difference in a particular area, but you also need to think about patient capital to make it happen. And then a lot of co-investors have happened. Breakthrough, Bill Gates Group is a co-investor with us. A lot of people joined us last year when we raised a $1.3 billion round. But that's how we think about it, like a big enough area, the best teams to deploy capital in, willingness to take the risk over a 5-10 year kind of a time journey, and then bringing the best people to make it happen. And then the investors will come, like more investors will come. But you have to de-risk it the right way.
In terms of that, so this is an approach that's earlier stage, right? And so to have meaningful amounts of significant capital is challenging because you have to justify the risk-adjusted returns. I'll have some perspective on that, but I want to ask you a question before that. Do you think that there is enough capital at this stage to work through what they call the valley of death challenges to get things to scale, or are we lacking there?
Certainly lacking there. I would look at it as these are all trillion-dollar industries that need to be disrupted. You can't just put few tens of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars to de-risk. You have to stage it the right way, but we certainly need to have a lot more capital coming into each of these industries. Unless you have that, if there are only few funds doing it, and these are all first-time funds, you always run the risk of people deploying too much capital in some of these industries too early, or kind of spraying and praying, and then not be able to support it in the next 3-5 years when there is an interest rate hike, which is happening now, or the market downturn, because there are 10 other sectors people can be investing into. So the biggest risk is if there is not sufficient capital, if the sufficient capital is not with the right folks, then you run the risk of whatever capital is deployed is not deployed right, and then a sector getting hit. This is exactly what happened in Cleantech 1.0. I say like startups didn't fail Cleantech 1.0, investors did. I know a lot of companies that had the patience that are now coming out in the light at the end of the tunnel. They were putting all the efforts behind, but the investors went away. So that was the biggest risk, and that's still possibly a risk. So more money needed, but more money with the right people.
Right, which is challenging. Because you're seeing the first-time funds because there's a lot of excitement. And I don't think anybody's doing it for the wrong reasons, but if they're investing in not the right opportunities, then it's very easy for those to say, listen, this doesn't work. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my vantage point, I see clean tech investing more akin to investing in pharmaceuticals, that it's generally long duration, capital intensive, sometimes binary. And in the biopharma world, given that you have, clinical stage 1, 2, and 3, which is done for ethical purposes, right? You have the drugs on a small sampling of people to understand the effects, and then a bigger group, et cetera, and see if you're meeting the endpoints. That kind of also de-risks it, right? Because you can say, fine, we got through clinical 1, well, we can increase valuation, the risk is less. Clinical 2, much less risk. Is there a comparable in the clean tech world, and should there be?
It is very comparable. So just like healthcare there are many areas in therapeutic drug development. That's why not many VCs are successful in therapeutics, drug development investments. There are some that are good. It's how you structure the funding. I can talk about myself. There are a couple of other VCs that may be doing it as well. So we have 3 investment vehicles. We have a $400 million seed fund, so we can write $2 to $10 million check. We have a $1 billion main fund, so we can write $5 to $30 million checks. We have a later stage fund, so we can write $50 to $75 million checks. The reason that's important is we can raise all 3 at the same time, invest from the seed fund, and continue to deploy capital till we run out of reserves from that fund. But we can deploy more money from the main fund for the right company. And then we can deploy money from the later stage fund from the right company. So that kind of patient capital is critical. That's why the current clean tech is not really the right one for typical venture capital investment. It is critical for earlier stage funds like us and later stage funds, bigger private equity funds, pension funds, all of us to come together to figure out how do you take these companies from 0 all the way to 100. Right? That's not how typically it's thought through in the software world or a lot of other venture capital in the past, because you could potentially have exits in software companies in 3, 5, 7-year kind of a time frame. The many companies I mentioned about, we've been investors for 12, 13 years. Now they're going through IPO, acquisition, all of that stuff, but it takes that amount of time because it takes 3, 4 years to develop a technology, 3 to 4 years to pilot the technology for the first of a kind plant, and then 3 to 4 years to get to commercialization. Like you can't compress that significantly, no matter what you do. So it takes that 7 to 10-year journey, and you have to be a patient investor across all of them. Just because you have de-risked, Series A, Series B kind of milestones, doesn't mean people should jump in and put a lot more money, because it can fall apart in many, many ways. So you have to structure it right, and that's where that patience matters a lot, particularly in clean tech. Very different from most other sectors. Therapeutics and pharma is probably the closest analogy.
Yeah, and I wanted to surprise you with this, Rajesh. And again, this is how I'd speak if you folks weren't here. But earlier today, I went across the river to meet with a professor at MIT. Could we say MIT here? Is that allowed?
I said it many times.
Oh, you said it many
times. I tried
MIT.
it.
Yeah. I have no MIT affiliation. You got a degree from there. And so I met with a professor by the name of Andrew Lowe, who does incredible work in financial engineering. And Andrew came up with a thesis some years ago about a mega fund to help solve cancer, to raise a significantly large fund to get the scale. And what we're talking about is this exact same thing, the parallels between biotherapeutics and climate tech. And one of the areas where we're talking, so I work for a Canadian pension firm called British Columbia Investments, the west coast of Canada. I'm from the States though, and so, we said, listen, about the top 100 asset owners have about 25 trillion of assets under management. If we went to the top 100 asset owners and we said, listen, you need to allocate 1% of your assets to climate transition, to investing across the stages, to patient capital, and you build a vehicle of, I think it's $250 billion, right? 1% of 20, is that correct? 1% of 25 trillion, 250 billion? Yeah, okay. And so you have a vehicle, $250 billion. We're not saying, you raise that overnight, but that would be an interesting approach because, we are, short of capital that's patient capital. And the other aspect that I think could be interesting is, and we're seeing this with some of the infrastructure projects, is to de-risk it, is to work with some clients to become equity holders who are going to get the offtake agreements, right? And so, because there's a supply and demand problem, the customers of the energy need to see that there's a supply. The suppliers need to see that there's a demand. So if you can work with your clients to become part of your equity holders, and you have an offtake agreement in place, that mitigates the risk quite considerably. So that's an area that we spent a little time. I want to spend some time talking to you about it. Is how do we leverage this capital? Because there's been a great amount of focus on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is around $350 billion for grants and subsidies in tax incentives that I understand is on cap, so that could go to $1 trillion, but I think that depends on the administration and who's running Congress. So
that's a big trump card.
Yeah. So I think that was a huge benefit, and that inspired a lot of interest in the area from traditional investors. But it's unfortunately still a small amount. and you need significant amount of capital and knowledge coming from the private sector as well. So any high-level thoughts on
the
that?
public-private partnership is very critical, right? Even in Clean Tech 1.0, a lot of companies survived. Tesla survived because there was government money coming in, right? Climate 2.2, again, a lot of investors are coming in because there is a really good commitment from the government in terms of hydrogen. I mean, I think the company you worked with, Electric Hydrogen in Boston, just raised about $300 million today, right? They announced $300 million. So all of that is coming because the government is also sending the right signal. But to Evan's point, there needs to be a lot bigger amount because governments can change, policies can change. So investors don't like to make a bet based on one political establishment, a given grant that's getting announced for much smaller dollars. So that getting those offtake agreements, I mean, there are some clever ways people are working on it. For example, I think just yesterday, some of the steel companies came together and talked about an offtake agreement that they'll say. They said, like, by 2030 or some number, X% of their steel would be green steel. Like, that sends a clear message both to investors as well as startups, as well as some of the government saying, hey, even the corporates are getting involved in that a lot. So that's happening in multiple industries. And John Kerry and the US government is doing a good job trying to create that initiative with on a couple of 4 or 5 sectors, cement, steel, and so on.
Hi, so Rajesh. So I'm Marcelo. I just graduated from Kennedy School. And last year, actually in April, we had the opportunity to organize a venture capital trip to Silicon Valley. And I'm almost sure we have visited Khosla Ventures. Okay. But if not, we have here the climate, where is Vidya? She's the climate director at the Harvard Kennedy School as a part of student group. So now we have a climate change director, right? Is the name of the role. And maybe we can organize a trek again to Silicon Valley and have the visit.
Actually, last year somebody reached out and I wasn't around in the town, so we couldn't.
Yeah, I think that was happening.
This time, absolutely.
My question is about a situation that I'm having now, like people working with high tech, like new breakthroughs in the technology, in this case, hydrogen, that they don't want to dilute the capital. They have investors, but they don't want to dilute the capital because if they accept the investments, they just end up with 15% or 10% of the company. So my question is, for this early stage, I'm saying like lab test. Yeah. Technology is proven, but there's a lab. Are you aware of granting mechanism? Or what kind of blended finance incentives or institutions that you recommend us looking to? Thank you.
ARPA-E has been very good. DOE has an ARPA-E program where early stage companies can apply for grants and really show the technology. We look at a lot of companies that have gone through the ARPA-E stuff. So that's definitely one kind of non-dilutive capital. And there are things like breakthrough fellows, they put in $1.5–2 million where, you get to test the technology, incubate the technology. There are some incubation groups like Greentown Labs and all that stuff. I don't know their exact structure in terms of how much equity you get, but there are plenty of ways you can think about. Definitely helps you de-risk the technology before raising a lot of money. But then the investor stuff is also not about just the dollars. Yeah, typically you get 15 to 20% diluted. So yeah, but you should look at it as what other value the investor is coming in with, not just the dollars, but how are they going to help you build the company, have they invested in this area before? All of that is critical part of the checklist.
Thank you. No, just a quick, this is US based, right? This company is in the European market. Do you have any, are they open to any initiatives, or do you, because I know that
I mean, we invest globally. We have companies in New Zealand, Singapore, Europe, all of that stuff. But there are grants, I'm sure, in Europe as well, but I have not heard about it as much as the programs that we have in the US.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts on investing specifically in developing contexts where there's a lot more perceived risk on sort of political uncertainty and a lot of basically I'm thinking about why is there so much investment in the US and Europe, but not so much in for example, Sub-Saharan Africa and places like that. So as an investor, what's your perspective on what that might look like in a few years and what's needed to get that going?
Yeah, so we have this concept of Chindia price that we look at. So when we invest in technologies, our view is the cost economics should go down so much that you should be able to sell the technology, develop this market in China and India as a proxy for saying it should be really low cost. So that's how we look at it. one challenge with some of the developing, whether it's like India or Africa, is not a lot of innovation comes from there. A lot of innovation execution comes from there for sure. So you have to differentiate between like which countries can execute well on existing technologies and which countries can execute well on innovative technologies, right? Like, so for example, India, we spend a lot of time looking at the India clean tech market, not because there are technical innovations coming there, but there are companies like Reliance, Adani, who are really thinking about 40 gigawatts of solar and tens of gigawatts of hydrogen, decarbonizing the shipping industry and all that stuff. When a country with 1 billion people, or countries like China care about that, it doesn't matter what the innovation that we are working on here, which is necessary in the next 5-10 years. But if somebody's executing, you want to figure out ways to help existing companies in the US deploy and move fast in some of those countries, because carbon is everywhere. It doesn't matter. It's not just US, right? You need to decarbonize countries like China and India as well. So you just put a different lens to it and still focus on kind of execution. Like, how do you scale fast?
But
Which country?
Putting aside the work that you do in innovation, in clean technology and just broadly energy transition, that's a really fundamental question that you ask. And to your point, the challenge is, I was attending a HBS Climate Week event in the springtime, and there was a member of parliament from India. And he said, listen, I have no doubt that the Western Europe and the US will get to net zero by 2050. I have a lot of doubt, but he didn't have any doubt. But his point was, he said, but India and China and Brazil and Russia, they're not going to get there. And it doesn't, if they don't get there and you get there, so what? It didn't work, right? And so, the question then becomes, are multilateral institutions set up to allow for that financial investment transfer? And they're really not set up for that. And so that's a fundamental challenge, as to how do you come up with creative means of funding. And there is a natural home market bias, and there is associated risk with, it's much easier to invest in the US as a large firm than it is to invest in a developing market. There's FX risk, which is quite substantial, foreign exchange risk. And so generally you have to have teams on the ground, and there's not as much comfort level. But if we can't figure that out, it's a massive problem. And that's not just innovation, that's across the board, from large scale solar projects and wind projects and financing them. So again, tremendous opportunity for those that are focused on capital markets to figure that out. But that's an area that needs to be solved.
Thank you very much, Evan and Rajesh, for your comments. I'm Emily Chen. I'm a fellow and work with some of the same folks that you have mentioned. I'm curious on two questions. The first is, I think we are in agreement there is a gap in the long-term capital that is needed to scale all of this work. There's also market uncertainty, technology certainty. Can you comment a little bit on any views you have on advanced market commitments, any particular areas that you think that they are more effective than others? I'm keying off of the biopharmaceutical examples that you gave earlier in your comments with Andrew Lowe. Is this a possible mechanism that could be helpful, or is it more hype?
Happy to jump in.
Thank you.
There's a lot of market commitment happening in direct air capture. That's one area where the CDR, the carbon dioxide removal, unless you send a pricing signal, investors are not interested in investing. So stepping back, I talked about nuclear fusion, all of that stuff, generation and all that. Like, this all will reduce CO2 that's going out there going forward, but there is a lot of CO2 out in the atmosphere. So you need an approach called direct air capture to actually take that CO2, either dump it to the ground or convert it to something else that's more useful that you're not burning back into the thing. So, but the issue is it's high price today in terms of production costs. So unless it comes down to far less than $100 per ton, this technology will not get an adoption. So a lot of companies like Microsoft and Amazon, no matter how some of these other companies may be thinking about greenwashing, are still putting a commitment out there saying, hey, if you have a technology for $300 per ton or $500 per ton, we'll buy those credits in the next 5 to 10 years. What that does is certainly creates a momentum for these startups and says, okay, there is corporate commitment. If we build it, they'll come. So that signal is also very critical, particularly if you're on a 3, 5, 10-year journey. So that's one area where we see a lot of commitment happening from some of the bigger corporates, because they're not finding many other ways to reduce their carbon footprint. So they can't solve it, but they're giving those commitments so technology companies can solve it.
But this not a direct answer to your question, but I think that it's worth spending a little time just talking about not only investing in climate mitigation, but also adaptation. And I know that, there are some purists that don't want to talk about adaptation, but we all need to face the reality. And we need to, our capital market system and our society is based upon a stationary climate, which has generally been for, several hundred plus years, right? Several centuries, and it will be, the climate will not be stationary going forward. And so how do we ensure that we are protecting various habitats and communities and putting up proper defenses, because we, will have significant human and financial challenges and tragedies that will be materializing because of these physical risks. And the challenge, though, is, maybe a large city like New York and San Francisco can potentially figure it out, but, large cities haven't figured out a lot so well recently. And then what about the smaller cities? And that's just in the developed world, right? So you look at the developing world. So I think, an equal amount of attention needs to be focused on what are the adaptation efforts and how are we building defenses in addition to the capital. My concern is just, we're in a high interest rate environment. We're in an inflationary environment. There is nobody wants to degrade their quality of living, but there will be that economic toll that this will bring about. Now, with that said, as we've discussed and you pointed out at the beginning, trillions of dollars of industries need to be rebuilt. There will be a lot of financial winners from that rebuilding or building up new trillions of dollars of industries.
I mean, this is the perfect opportunity for you folks, right? You are middle of Harvard, MIT, you are the best engineering schools, best business schools. There is no excuse for any of you to not work on climate, right? No matter which industry you are in, ability to make so much of an impact, given the timing, given the incentives that are going on, given the careers that are getting built, whether in the VC or in the later stage financing or startups. I mean, we're talking about a lot of challenges, but that really means a lot of opportunities. If most people haven't figured out, this is your opportunity to go and figure out, along with a lot of other people who are committed to the sector. So it's not like you're starting from clean slate. You're starting from, where people like us have been working on it for 15, 18 years, but we have a lot of veterans who have worked on it for 20, 30, 40 years that we get a lot of feedback from, guidance from, and all that stuff. So this is a fantastic opportunity, actually. Like, every challenge we bring up is a huge opportunity for you guys go and solve this. So how many of you are looking at career and climate now? Okay, that's very encouraging.
How many were looking at it before this conversation?
I'm sure all of them. You don't need to make us feel
wow,
good.
That was we got a big increase there.
As far as the hands.
Yeah. But I would say that for those that have been involved in some companies, there's, ERP systems, right? And whenever you have to build an ERP system in a large company, it takes huge effort. It takes tens of millions of dollars and several years, and then it's not even done correctly half the time. Yeah. We basically need to rebuild an ERP system for the global economic system, and that's a lofty challenge. And what was said at the beginning, whether you consciously strive for a career in climate or not, you will be involved in climate transition one way or the other.
But just make sure you don't put everything under the climate bucket and do any kind of greenwashing. That just sucks. Right? After being in a place like Harvard and MIT and Boston, where there is so much opportunity, so many companies are raising money, and you can raise your hand and people would love to figure out how to make you work. I mean, one thing I want to emphasize, don't think about you've never worked on energy or climate and therefore you cannot do it. If you look at every industry has been disrupted only by people coming from outside that industry. Look at cars. Cars were not disrupted by people in GM and Ford. It was disrupted by Tesla. These guys were not from the car industry. Look at finance. It was not disrupted by people from Visa and MasterCard. It was like people like PayPal. Right? There's so many industries where this has happened repeatedly that only people from outside the industry can figure out how to disrupt any of these existing industries. So keep that in mind as you think about climate as a sector.
I know we're out of time. Can I say one thing? Or
so not that we can stop you.
Yeah, well, it's true. You learn that. I just want to point out one thing. So when I was invited to do this, I told my parents who live in Connecticut, which is nearby for those that are not familiar with geography, and they said, "Oh, that's nice. Have a nice presentation." And they say, oh, who else is there? And I said, oh, my section mate Rajesh is coming, and he's a partner at Khosla, and he's done all this stuff. They said, oh, can we go? And so my parents are here in the audience, and so I thank Rajesh for inspiring them to listen to me. But
Look, I take the early stage risk, but this guy puts a lot of money at the later stage, so he's going to make it happen. He's the execution guy. Hold him to it.
A team deal. Well, thank you guys so much. It's very kind of you to come out on such a nice evening like this and to learn a little bit about this. And I think I'll speak for you, Rajesh. But feel free. I think there's some event afterwards, and we'll have this session. But feel free to reach out, to me or to Rajesh if you have questions or want to get some mentorship here. That's kind of part of the equation that we certainly give back, because others have done it for us from this community.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Really.
I can't thank you enough. So Evan and Rajesh are going to stay for dinner. So if you have additional questions, you can continue to ask them over dinner. And now I would like to invite our second panelist up here, Rebekah Emanuel. Is an HBS graduate and senior advisor for social impact at the Harvard Innovation Labs. Jerry Huang is a junior in the college and founder of Carbon Sense, and Haripriya Bhaskar, who is a second-year Harvard Business School student who has a diverse background in operations, technology, and climate investing and sustainability startup mentorship. So I'll start with you, Rebekah.
Awesome.
All right, great. So students often face a choice between traditional career paths and more entrepreneurial or socially impactful roles. How did you decide to pursue a career that blends entrepreneurship and social impact, and what factors should students consider when making similar choices?
Awesome. Thanks so much. And welcome, everyone. How are you all doing today? Good? Awesome. So how many of you are thinking about traditional career paths versus sort of a social mission, perhaps climate? Raise your hand. Unclear. Okay. Sounds great. So I've been in both, right? I worked at McKinsey. I worked as a federal regulator. I worked in municipal government. And I would say in all of those, you're all dealing with social missions all the time, it turns out. We all live in society. I've also worked at organizations that are much more specifically mission focused. And so what I would say is the key advice that I have for you that is easy to learn the hard way, and I recommend you don't, is to ask, where are the incentives? What will get these people out of a job? And is that aligned with where I'm hoping this goes? So if the money is coming in over here, but you're hoping the organization goes over here, it doesn't matter if it's government, nonprofit, or for-profit. That's going to be a tricky one. It's just going to be hard for you to bang your head against moving that organization in a different way. So I recommend thinking about an alignment of incentives as your core criteria rather than a particular industry or structure of the organization. Now, what I would say is I would recommend paying attention to where your brain is a steel sponge or a steel sieve, or a steel trap versus a steel sieve, right? So there are times that I'm so good at remembering things. I can tell you all about mushroom networks in soil. God bless us, I won't tell you about it today, right? But there are also things, maybe Evan's areas, where, I should be really, really interested in. Boy, I couldn't tell you a lot of things that I have definitely reviewed. And that's about me. And I recommend spending time in the areas that you naturally remember things because you're so excited about them. And I know not all of our Harvard education, not all of our education and fancy internships tells you pay attention to where you're excited, but that is my advice for you. I will also say that there are situations that you find yourself in that you didn't anticipate, and turning a crisis into an opportunity is a really wonderful possibility there. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story here. So I worked in the city of Boston. I was in charge of the first long-term plan for the city of Boston in 50 years. And that sounds really cool, right? But it turns out that there were two reports we had that were, maybe going to come out at similar times, one about where we were going to put our houses and one about where it was going to flood. Right. And the question is, how can I help figure this out for a city that is intending to do really good things, right? We're a leader on both of those areas, on housing, on sort of equitability of an expensive city, and on climate. Well, man, this is actually a really tricky one. And you find interesting, this is back to your original question, interesting allies, right? Our CFO doesn't want a big, expensive mess. And so figuring out who in their structural positions has interests in combining that. And I just want to echo something Rajesh said. I don't really care what your background is to date. There is a lot of opportunity in this space, whether it's as a CFO or as someone who's an excellent listener, which is the basis, I would argue, of all good innovation, is understanding where people's needs are not being met, which involves really good listening. Or if it's as thinking about the best shoe design ever, which I would argue has a lot to do with taking new solutions to market and figuring out how adoption and scale really works. So I think it's mostly about thinking about what are your unique sort of steel trap themes, and then where are the areas in this world that matter. I teach a class called How to Create a Climate Venture that starts with people who don't have a climate idea, but wish they had a startup in climate, and goes through structured ideation, 5 weeks of ideation and 5 weeks of idea evaluation. And so there's just a lot of techniques to get you from here to there if you know there's a issue area. It could be climate, it could be inequality, it could be healthcare, that really grabs you, and you're not quite sure how to start. So happy to be a resource for that. I have the great joy of working behind that door over there at the Harvard Innovation Labs that helps people all day, every day, think about how to take the idea they have in their head into reality, and also helps people take the cause or the issue they care about and move that into idea so you can move that into reality.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. So it's been mentioned tonight that every job is going to be a climate job now and into the future, right? And you've worked in a lot of different jobs, as you've mentioned. McKinsey, you've worked for the city of Boston. But how do you see the role of innovation and entrepreneurship, particularly in driving climate action, and what unique contributions can startups make in addressing climate change? We've talked a little bit about this with Rajesh and Evan. I'm curious what your perspective is.
Yeah, so my experience here is that every industry is going to have to change. Well, gee, that means we have to have a lot of new ideas that we don't have now that suddenly have to get into practice and into scale. Shoot! It turns out that taking a new idea, figuring out what's really needed, taking it to pilot and taking it to scale has a name. It's called entrepreneurship. And there's accumulated human wisdom as how to do it well and how to really mess it up and drive yourself into walls. And if this is something that we need to do rapidly, more rapidly than we've done almost anything as a species, we're going to have to figure it out how to do it really fast. So I sort of see my personal mission as more shots on goal, more good shots on goal. And those are two perhaps separate things. So we need a big, wide funnel. If I take this away, you won't have a recording. And then also all the tools to make you really effective when you're trying to do that. But I do think it's one of those things that you can name any industry, shoe design all the way on through to consulting services, and say, oh, wow, I guess this is going to need to change, both from a mitigation standpoint, right, like less emissions in the atmosphere, and from an adaptation standpoint, man, it looked like this worked when our climate was sort of stationary, and it doesn't look like it's going to work anymore. So everything from, from shipping on up. And so that just means lots of shots on goal, which means lots of innovation, which is where you guys come in.
Great. And speaking of which, can you share a little bit more about the resources available to students, alumni here at the Harvard Innovation Labs?
Yeah. So how many of you guys have had a moment maybe when you're walking fast to class and a little bit late and are saying, wow, that would be a cool startup, but probably I can't do that. Anyone? Yeah, it's a very common experience. So we are here to turn that feeling into like, well, maybe. So a couple of different resources for you just to know about. One, if you wish you had an idea and you don't, come through. If you have an idea and you don't know what to do next, we're here to help you. If you have an idea and you're serving 2.4 million people every day, which I have a team I was talking with yesterday that does this, we're also here to help you. And so a couple different on-ramps. One is that there's, if you're a current student, you can just sign up for iLab membership. It's like a form and we accept everyone. And the goal of the form is to figure out what stage you're at and how we can help you best. So different people at different stages need different things, and we try and be really specific about helping you at the stage you're at. Second is if you're an alumni, we have a bunch of different programs for you. So I'm going to talk about climate in particular, but I just want to acknowledge that lots of climate things are also other things, right? An ed tech venture can also be a climate venture, depending on what you're doing, as can an e-commerce venture, right? And so if you're in the pre-idea stage, shoot, I wish I had an idea, but I don't. I sort of have an idea, but I'm not really sure if it's good. We've got this 10-week, totally for fun, not for credit class that will take you through this. If you're in a stage of, hey, I have something a little bit real, maybe I have intellectual property, maybe I have people actively using it, but I don't know how to get it a little further, we've got this thing called the Climate Circle. Applications are open now, and it's both for students and alums. We have about 1/3 students, 2/3 alums, anywhere in the world. We actually have 2/3 of our founders happen to be either women or people of color. And like, guess what? That's because climate affects all of us. And all of us have the ability to see pain points and the ability to translate those into solutions. And so what that does is that that'll give you one-on-one concierge support wherever you need it. So let's say you're wondering about your right legal structure, we'll give you long-term pro bono legal matching. If you're doing a negotiation with a manufacturer or with a venture capitalist, we will give you one-on-one support from folks who help run Harvard Law School's negotiation and mediation clinic. If you're thinking about introductions into manufacturing or funders or donations, we'll help do double-blind one-on-one introductions for that. So that's once you're a little bit real. Doesn't have to be very, but enough that a third-party folks wanna start partnering with you. And then we've got all stuff in between. And the great news is that both I and a bunch of other folks have online bookable office hours. So if you're selling to organizations, you can just decide that you want to talk with someone and book 30 minutes and talk about it. If you want to talk about something mission-driven, perhaps climate, I might be your point person for that. And same deal, we also have 100+ experts and a whole bunch of climate specializations. And you can also just go online and book office hours. It's hopefully should make you feel like you're always surrounded by resources to take something up. And like I say, what we need is more shots on goal. So we are here to make those easy, to make you go from maybe to maybe, and then also to go from this place of saying, I'll give it a shot, to, hey, that was a good shot. So that's what we're here for.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Rebekah. And I'm going to turn now to Jerry, who is taking advantage of some of these resources right now. So Jerry, you're technically a junior in the college, right? And you're started your own company. Can you tell us why you're taking the entrepreneurship route by starting your own company, Carbon Sense Technologies, and the key resource such as the Harvard Innovation Labs or other resources at Harvard and beyond that are helping you overcome some of these innate challenges that any founder is facing?
Sure. Okay, yeah. So to answer this question, I'll first explain what I'm doing as a startup founder, and how I was lucky to be here in Harvard to expand my business. So first about me, I'm Jerry. I was class of 2022. I was supposed to graduate last summer. However, COVID happened in 2020. So when I was in college, I have two big interests. One is I'm a CS major, doing coding. And I founded a club on campus called Harvard College Data Analytics Group, basically providing algorithm to the clients. We got maybe $500,000 a year. That's my first track record. My second passion back in college was I'm a big cyclist. I was the captain and president for Harvard Cycling Club. And before coming to Harvard, I cycled from Europe to China along the Silk Road to see the world in a beautiful way. So in 2020, COVID happened. I don't know what you guys were doing when everything was suspended. I was back in China because I'm an international student. And I think similar to the previous questions, what should I do in my career? There are so many questions. So I first interned, in McKinsey, and I was in TikTok doing product management. But eventually, my conclusion is, I can only be the best in the things I really have ownership and agency for. So what is that problem that I'm trying to solve? We spent a few months, navigating what's the question we want to solve. But before that, I want to ask a question. We are talking about solar panels here. So which company produces the most solar panel module in the world? Does any of you guys know? Longi. Who is the second? Okay, yeah. But of course,
Unfair.
I can go to the list. But the second question is, we know they're producing green electricity, but the time that to manufacture those solar panel modules, they also cost energy and carbon emission. On average, how many years of payback do we get those life cycle of those solar panels to be completely green? It's a long question. We don't have the answer, but my company is for that. So back in 2020, I was in China, and so I was lucky to put my interests together in computer science and in climate. And my parents and my co-founders' parents, they both own factories, and that's why we got into the field of producing ERP, but producing the energy and carbon management system for the factories. Why? Because when we talk about those products, they're not green innately. We have to consider the life cycle assessment of the silicon of those solar panel modules, all the way from the ingot to the wafer to the cell to the modules. So we serve 3 of the 10 biggest Chinese solar panel companies or the world. Trina Solar, Tongwei Solar, because for us, we are lucky to start the game a little bit early, and we have the contacts, we have the patents, we deploy sensors to have the equipment level energy accounting in the factories, and we obviously plug in with their supply chain management system and ask surveys for their tier 1 companies for the scope 3 emission. But in short, we provide this scope 1, 2, 3, the whole energy and carbon management system for our factories. Because
Do you want to say what scope 1, 2, 3 is, just for
Yeah, sure. So for scope 1, we call it, you can think of it as the direct carbon emission that is more tangible, the greenhouse gases that actually emit in the premises of the business license. Scope 2 is the indirect ones, which is every single kilowatt hour of the electricity that we're using here right now, and all the heat and gas, for the factories that will import from other sources, those indirect and those intangible carbon emission. Scope 3 is something that is even bigger in scope. There's upstream, downstream. Upstream is their supply chain, their tier 1, their suppliers, and their other commuting, etc. Downstream is when it comes to the usage of those products, what their CO2 is. So for me, with my team, we were lucky because we got lit before Xi Jinping announced the plan of going carbon neutral by 2060. We developed those clients, with our connections, with our business development team. So for the past 3 years in Shanghai, we grew to around 25 people. We raised around $1.5 million. And we already have clients like Siemens, ABB, Sumitomo, and those Chinese solar panel companies in China. And the reason why I'm here right now in Cambridge is because we are going global, going to America, and going to Europe. Because honestly, Europe is the place that has the strictest regulation. You guys might have heard the CBAM, which is the Border Adjustment Mechanism. However, there are also country-specific and industry-specific laws that has been put in place. Like the EU battery law that many of you guys might heard of, which asks for the battery passport for their environment declaration, their carbon footprint, RCA. And French, for example, Macron has announced all the solar panel module company that enters open bid in the French market should have their simplified RCA. So we took it as an advantage because the biggest market for CO2 and green stuff right now is in Europe. And where they're produced, they're in China. And so basically, in short, we become the bridge, a digital bridge, to help the Chinese company comply to Chinese standard with the Ministry of Industry and Information in China, and comply with the European standards, the European Commission, and third-party companies like SGS. That's what I've been doing. And the reason why I enrolled as a student is because unlike
you weren't busy enough.
Yes, I'm not busy enough. I love Harvard. I do. And as an international founder, as different with Gates or Zuckerberg, we need a visa. So that's why I'm here, taking the best of the both world. But in short, back to the question. how did Harvard nurture me? I think one is the iLab is amazing. I was lucky to talk with Rebekah for the past few months. She gave many amazing, insightful ideas. And second is the amazing faculty members and folks here. I was lucky to join Mario's class in the climate change, and the big professors, Professor Cass Sunstein, Professor Robert Stevens, those many big, and obviously, and Professor Schrick, those big heads in this field, they gave me many strategic, long-term ideas on how I can expand my business. And third is I was amazed to be surrounded by folks who are interested in this. Frankly speaking, 2019, to be honest, I think it's much less popularity than here right now, because back in Trump's time, blah, blah, blah. And lastly, I think iLab as a space is a huge help, because for a startup, we already have some scale, we already have clients, we want to have things in person. This place, 24/7, with the free Coca-Cola and the free, the honey.
We like to say that's our biggest value proposition is snacks.
The biggest, I would say. All of this make us more confident in combating, the climate change. For us specifically, the manufacturing.
Snacks, it really powers combating climate change.
So that's my story, and I was lucky to be here with all the support from my Harvard friends, and I'd like to keep it forward and try to, together with more people.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jerry. It's very, very inspiring, very inspiring. We're going to turn now to Hari. So prior to coming to Harvard Business School, you had an extensive career at the intersection of technology, operations, and climate action, particularly in the oil and gas industry. And now you're interested primarily in climate tech and impact investing. And you recently completed an internship with Azola Ventures this summer. Can you share a bit more about why you're shifting your career in this trajectory and any advice you have for students who are also interested in this similar space?
So what made me to change my trajectory was, then I was working in Singapore. I was working with an oil and gas firm, but I used to stay close to a engineering campus there, and randomly I just used to go and watch, because I'm an engineer myself, so I could never take the technology bug out of me. That's when I started working close with founders, and more I worked with founders and also strategy within my own firm. I realized if I think about it long term, I don't want to be part of incremental innovation. The only thing which can make any meaningful contribution is disruption. So I was very clear, I want to move to this technology side, or startup side rather. That's the first thing which triggered my thought. And the second part, I would say, is also, I follow the macro trends. One good example is the organization I used to work in. We moved from producing petrochemicals to producing the sustainable aviation fuel, which Rajesh mentioned earlier, and biofuels. So in real time, I could see the transition happening. So I know the future is headed for a right cause. And the third thing also I realized was, being an engineer myself, I realized a lot of time it's not just a technology issue, because we know how to solve this problem at many occasions. But the thing is, I couldn't make a business case to support my climate action strategies. So that's why I realized it's not an engineering problem anymore, rather it's a business problem. That also prompted me to come to business school. And to the second part of your question regarding how exactly was I able to land where I wanted to. Again, this I would say, I can't believe I'm saying this. First is networking. Networking is a nightmare for me personally. So what I used to think is, in my mind, I reframed it as search for stories. So I used to shamelessly go to Kennedy School. I used to go to design school. I went to D3 workshops. I attended how to create climate ventures class. I was also meeting a lot of people in iLabs itself. I went to MIT campus. I went to MIT Media Labs. But everywhere I went, I had only two thumb rules. One was that I'm happy if I come back and then recollect at least 2 or 3 stories, right? And this gave me wider exposure. A lot of times I was the only student in alumni dinners as well. Even they don't know what I was doing there. But it helped me to gather a lot of stories. That gave me broader exposure. Once I narrowed down, these are the stories which excited to me personally, then I started sharing my dreams with them. Instead of asking can you refer me to someone, I used to ask questions like, I'm thinking about this now. Like, for example, I'm excited about startups, but I also think I want to know which industry I want to go in because climate is such a wide space. So I used to ask questions like, if you are in my seat, what would you do? Right? That kind of opened up a new conversation, and people are always excited to share their stories or their views of something, which helped me to get there. In fact, even my internship, how I landed was through Climate Symposium. I went to Climate Symposium, and then after a panel, I went to one of the speaker, and I was sharing like how I felt underrepresented the VC spaces. And then he connected me to someone. That person gave me a one introduction to the firm I ended up finally working with. So it's amazing the kind of connections you can make. So my advice would be just shamelessly share whatever you want, and you don't even know where it can take you.
That's fantastic. And you spoke of the symposium, the Climate Action Symposium, that you were involved in and are involved in this year. Can you speak a little bit more about the symposium and how students and non-students can participate?
Yeah, so the Climate Symposium happens annually. Last year, we had in-person symposium after the pandemic, and it's a very good way to hear speakers like the panel earlier, and also to learn about like the wider, your peer network within the Harvard ecosystem who are working in this space, as well as like outside industry representation as well. This year, it's going to happen in November 18th and 19th. And we are also having startup pitch competition as part of Climate Symposium. So if you are thinking of idea, or if you know anyone who is working on an idea, it's a good platform to build your network as well as, of course, to get a grant as well.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking our second panel.